Welcome to Reparenting Radio. I'm Lisa Watson, architect of human transformation. This is a space for leaders, parents, and anyone ready to break old patterns, regulate their nervous system, and show up in their life with clarity and self-trust. If you're ready to change the way you lead, love, and live, you're in the right place. Let's begin. Hello, and welcome back to Reparenting Radio. I have to tell you, I have spent years working with people healing relationship wounds, nervous system dysregulation, subconscious patterns, and childhood conditioning. But this week, I found myself, again, confronting something that I think lives underneath far more adult suffering than we realize. What happens when unresolved pain turns into control? What happens when heartbreak becomes leverage and when fear becomes punishment? What happens when emotional survival becomes more important than emotional safety? And before I go any further, I just want to say that I do know that most people are not consciously trying to harm or hurt anyone, really. Most people are just dysregulated. They're triggered, they're terrified, and they're operating from survival and don't even know it. Operating from unresolved wounds and subconscious programming is something that most of us are doing and we just fully don't understand. But understanding why someone behaves a certain way does not erase the impact that that behavior has on the nervous system around them, especially children. Because children do not experience your intentions. They experience your nervous system. They experience the emotional atmosphere of the home, the tension in your voice, the silence after the argument, the withdrawal, the unpredictability, the emotional pressure, the fear, the instability, the feeling that love can disappear at any moment, or at least it can feel like it. And one of the hardest truths I've learned through this work is this: pain that is not processed often gets transferred. Sometimes it gets transferred through anger, silence, control, sometimes through emotional alliance building, sometimes through financial power or withdrawal, sometimes through the unconscious need to win. And in many families, children quietly end up carrying emotional weight that was never theirs to hold. Not because anyone sat down and intentionally said, I want to traumatize my child, but because dysregulated nervous systems often pull children into emotional survival dynamics without even realizing it. Children become emotional witnesses. They become emotional mediators and regulators, sometimes even emotional partners to wounded parents, and the child adapts. That's the important part. Children adapt brilliantly. A child learns, Mom is overwhelmed. I need to stay small. Dad is angry. I need to avoid conflict. If I make everyone happy, maybe the tension here will go away. If I don't have any needs, maybe I'll still be loved. And if I explain myself enough, maybe I'll be safe. And eventually, those adaptations stop feeling like adaptations. They become identity. That's why so many adults today are walking around believing, I'm just anxious. Oh, I'm just a perfectionist. Oh, I'm just highly sensitive. Oh, I've always been a procrastinator. I'm just, I just overthink. It's just who I am. But many times those are not personality traits. They're nervous system strategies that were adopted in childhood. Strategies learned in environments where emotional safety felt uncertain. And this is why I say all the time, you are not broken, you're just patterned. Your nervous system learned what it needed to learn in order to survive the emotional environment that it was raised in. Now, you're using these same patterns of behavior that you needed as a child to protect you. You're using them unconsciously because they've become subconscious programming and habits. And I think that conversations like this can accidentally become oversimplistic because sometimes people want one villain. They want a bad parent or they want an innocent parent. But human beings are more complicated than that. And two things can be true at once. Someone can genuinely love their child and still unconsciously transfer unresolved pain onto them. Someone can be hurting deeply and still use control, withdrawal, blame, fear, or emotional pressure because their nervous system is simply wired to survive. That does not make them evil. But awareness matters because without awareness, pain will simply continue to repeat itself. And I think many adults today are still carrying the nervous system imprint of growing up between two wounded adults who could not fully see beyond their own pain. And you can feel it later in life as hypervigilance, people-pleasing, fear of conflict, emotional shutdown, difficulty resting, chronic fatigue, chronic guilt, over-explaining, apologizing, fear of abandonment, difficulty trusting, becoming the emotional caretaker in every relationship, codependency. Our first instinct is to think, oh, what's going on in my current reality to make me this way? But that's not the case. The body remembers environments, feelings, not just events. And healing, real healing, is not just learning how to feel better. It's not just about a new mindset. It's becoming conscious enough to stop transferring that unprocessed pain onto other people, especially the people we love the most, especially children, because they're so impressionable and their subconscious minds are being formed. They're so delicate. It matters so much how we talk to them. Healing asks, can I regulate myself enough to pause before I react? Can I tell the truth about what is really underneath my anger? Can I stop making another human responsible for my wounds? And can I choose awareness over retaliation? Can I stop turning connection into control? These are not easy questions, especially if you're not aware that all of your reactions come from within. But awareness interrupts repetition. And sometimes one conscious person in a family can change the entire emotional future of everyone who comes after them. And I think that that's what this work is really about. That's why I also write children's books, getting it on the other end. Not perfection, but presence, awareness, responsibility, and creating emotional safety where survival once lived. And if you're listening to this while you're navigating conflict, separation, resentment, heartbreak, or deep emotional pain of some sort with someone that perhaps you share a child with, I want to offer you something practical here. Not from judgment, but simply from awareness. Because conflict itself is not always what harms children most. It's when children become emotionally responsible for the conflict. It's when they become emotional containers for adult pain. It's when they feel forced to carry loyalty, fear, guilt, pressure, or emotional responsibility that their nervous systems were never designed to hold. So here are some things to watch for. Signs that your child may be carrying emotional weight that they were never meant to hold. Are they hyper aware of adult moods? Maybe they're trying to mediate or fix tension. Are they asking constantly if you're upset or if you're okay? Does it appear that they're feeling responsible for keeping the peace? Is there anxiety around transitions between homes? Personality shifts after conflict? Trouble sleeping? Emotional shutdown? Are they becoming overly mature or overly compliant? Are they feeling like they have to choose sides? Are they repeating adult language that they should not be exposed to? Or feeling guilty for loving both parents? Maybe acting differently around each parent out of emotional survival. Children should never feel emotionally punished for loving both parents, even if one of them is very dysregulated. And sometimes adults unconsciously pull children into conflict without realizing it. We're so blinded by our own wounding and trauma that we don't even see what we're doing. And this can look like venting adult emotional pain to our children, asking children to report information to us, or using them as messengers, speaking negatively about the other parent in front of them, making them emotionally responsible for loneliness, oversharing adult legal or financial information or conflict, maybe dropping subtle guilt statements like, well, I guess you'd rather be there, or it must be nice to be over there, or what, you don't miss me? Needing emotional reassurance from the child, competing for affection or loyalty with the other parent, or making children feel like loving the other parent is betrayal. Children deserve the right to love both parents without carrying the emotional burden of adult wounds. That does not mean that difficult situations are easy. Sometimes there is real betrayal, real heartbreak, real anger, real trauma, real grief. I get it. But children still deserve emotional safety inside adult pain. And trust me, I know this firsthand. I was in a very challenging marriage for over 28 years. I have 2 grown children. And I had to navigate this on a daily basis. We can pause conversations when we're dysregulated. We can regulate before we respond. We can keep adult conversations between adults. And we can let children remain children. We can reassure them that this is not your fault. And these things need to be said because children in divorce situations, honestly, especially under the age of 8, they don't see how it is not their fault. Everything is about them. Everything is because of them. And so for them to hear this is not your fault, this has nothing to do with you, and you are loved, they need to hear that often. They need to hear that they don't need to fix this. They need to hear that they're safe to love both parents. We can protect routines and predictability where possible. We can repair after conflict. We can say, I'm sorry that you heard that. That was adult stress, not your responsibility. We can seek support outside the child. We don't have to talk to our child about the issues we're having with their other parent. We can talk to friends, therapists, coaches, support systems. We can go to mediation. We can use regulation tools. Because children are not emotional containers for adult grief. And I think one of the most important reframes we can hold is the goal is not to become perfect parents. I don't know if there's such a thing. An imperfect parent is a perfect parent. The goal is to become conscious enough that our children do not have to spend adulthood recovering from the emotional environments that we created while we were dysregulated. And if you're recognizing yourself in some of this, that does not mean you're a bad parent. You're just human. You're conditioned. You're patterned. You're perfect. But awareness is the interruption. It's not condemnation. The moment you can see the pattern, you're no longer fully unconscious inside of it. And that matters more than perfection ever will. So if this rang a bell with you, listen again. Do you find yourself saying any of those statements? Do you see these behaviors in your children? Listen again. Zoom out. Zoom out of your own body. Zoom out of your own nervous system. And start observing yourself. All right, friends, that's what I have for you today. And if this episode stirred something inside of you, I just want you to know, awareness, it's where change begins. And if you're wanting some reminders on how to consistently practice reprogramming yourself and seeing your patterns, I have put together a few free resources for you. I have a quick start guide to reparenting yourself. I have a guide to conscious parenting and a guide for leaders on what to look for before they scale. The links to download any of these free PDFs are all in the show notes below. Thank you so much, folks. I appreciate you. I love you. Thank you for listening, and I will talk to you next week. Thank you for listening to Reparenting Radio. If today's conversation supported you, take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who knows they were made for more than the patterns that they inherited. If you're ready for serious inner work and real transformation, personally or professionally, you can explore my leadership pathways at lisa-watson.com. And if you're raising little ones alongside your own healing, you'll find my children's books at awakentheone.org. Until next time, stay grounded, stay open, and keep reparenting the parts of you that are ready to come home to their authenticity.